I realized pretty quickly that I was in a little bit over my skis as I started to look at different business opportunities in the area. And that's what brought me to franchising. I thought it would be important before I went out and hired a general manager from the beginning to take on a little bit of this myself. But at the end of the day, you're not making this on your own.
So there's so many great options. And I talk about the autonomy of a business. I always say to someone, if you're going to leave your job, if you have the ability to leave your job, who's paying your rent? Who's paying your mortgage?
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast, where you can escape the corporate trap through franchise ownership. Here's your host, ɪᴍᴘᴏ Grammatico, the Franchise Guide.
Welcome to the Franchise Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, ɪᴍᴘᴏ Grammatico, your franchise guide, the show where we help corporate executives experience time and financial freedom. Welcome. Very excited for today. We have a two-part series with Joey Romanczuk. And Joey, we had worked together last year, worked for a major auto company and just needed a change, left the job and, was looking at a franchise business. So really excited. We're doing a two-part series. We're going to talk about, how he went from employee to employer, exactly what he was looking for in a business and then how things are going now. So very excited for today. So Joey, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I always throw that out there, and I know people get busy, so I appreciate the time. And by the way, let's continue these. Maybe we'll do another show a year out from now and see how things are going and progressing. So, if you could just before we dive in, I had some questions I wanted to ask you, book recommendations and things like that. But I wanted to start off if you can give the audience a little context, a little background information.
Yeah, absolutely, Giuseppe. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Joey Romanczuk. I'm the proud owner of ɪᴍᴘᴏ of Hudson County. Like a lot of your listeners, I'm sure, I was a corporate exec, so I was a general manager for a large automotive firm. I had done that for a number of years. Grew to be a territory operations manager with a large customer service team underneath me. The long and short of it is we helped about 20 different service centers with customer service and customer interactions. I was by all means doing well. I was receiving promotions, getting better responsibilities, increasing my earning potential with the company. But what I didn't have was time. I didn't have time, weekends, holidays, you name it. If you were doing a Memorial Day weekend down at your house, there was no way I was going to be able to attend. So I started to look around at myself and I said, well, hey, I've done well and I've grown professionally, but at the end of the day, I don't have the same time that I wish that I had for things. I started to look at business ownership. I realized pretty quickly that I was in a little bit over my skis as I started to look at different business opportunities in the area. And that's what brought me to franchising. So you and I had plenty of conversations. We had conversations, positive and negatively, about my skills, what works. Is this going to be the one? Maybe this is the brand, and settled on ɪᴍᴘᴏ. So we've been operational now for the last call it 3 months. So it's still in the very early formative days for us, but especially with where I'm at as our business, still very close to the due diligence done to make this decision, and some of the early days after having made this decision. And I hope that some of my feedback helps others consider the same thing.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And one thing I'd like to mention, and we talked about this before the show, is, when you talk about feedback, just giving us the journey, right? It's not this clear transition. It's exactly, this is going to happen and there's never going to be an issue or a hiccup or anything like that. And sometimes the expectations, things exceed the expectations. So I like how you're putting out, I don't know if it's weekly or every other week. I forget the frequency, but kind of an update. How things are going. This is it's a big transition, right? Going from employee to employer. I always say you go from signing the front, the back of the check of your paycheck to the front of the check. So talk to us a little bit about that transition. Just that's an emotional roller coaster, right? Having that consistent paycheck, responding to the employer. Basically, they're telling you exactly what needs to get done. You're just showing up. So talk to us about that transition. Talking about how that affected your family, your thought process, and what that looked like.
Yeah, it was a decision that I think, okay, let's back up. When you think about the decision to go from the corporate world of having a W-2 job to being a business owner, it is a binary decision where I need to make it, right? But at the end of the day, you're not making this on your own. And
Right.
I think that was the thing that really helped me. I mean, this decision couldn't have been made without the support of my fiance, without the conversations of my peer advisors, my father, the people in my life who have been a powerful guiding light for me so that I can tell whether or not, even though, this sounds good, this sounds like something that we can do, that group advisory is really important to making sure that I'm receiving checks and balances of what I believe is a good decision.
Right.
So, I think the first place that I would take this is that feeling in corporate America of being like, whether it is, you have a good job that you're happy with, but maybe some of your needs aren't being met. Maybe it's the feeling that you're being compensated, not compensated enough, and want a little bit of a change.
Mhm.
For me, it was, I said it before, it was time. I was working just about every weekend. Saturdays were mandatory, holidays were mandatory. And that to me was like the first little nugget of maybe something needs to change here. I want to start working to get a little bit of this time back. And as I continued to grow, I thought to myself, well, I've experienced a number of promotions, and that's
Right.
only brought me increased responsibility, but also just like increased time and presence in some of these roles. I was working for a company who, the higher you grew, the more involved and invested in all aspects you had to be. And so for me, the only piece that was missing was the business ownership, because I believed that the better manager I was, the better I could maximize my people, the less I should have tactically that I need to do day to day. And it just wasn't the case.
Right.
I was very much so like this piece in the machine that had to make certain things go. And when I wasn't there, things weren't able to advance in a way that scaled me out of the business. Even though we all know the best way for an owner to scale out is for getting the right people in. So I wasn't able to make some of those decisions. Um, Having made this and having now been on the other side of it, you're absolutely right. I think some of the early challenges is about taking on and accepting the responsibility that these decisions kind of start and end with me. And the nice thing about the franchise model is you have the support that you need to be able to make that decision in a right way. But as the business owner, the onus of making that decision falls on my shoulders. And I think that that's probably one of the harder transitions I hear people talking about when it comes to exploring whether or not the franchise thing is for them.
Mhm.
Some of these corporate environments are so structured where you might feel like you're making decisions, but it's really, you've been given two, it's like the Matrix. You've been given two pills, take this one or this one.
Right.
In the franchise world, you're suddenly standing like at a pharmacy trying to figure out like what is the right medicine for me to take for this thing. And so it's a lot of information intake. It's also a lot of trial and error. You have to be pretty comfortable with just a little bit of trial and error, because you might not get it right. You might thought you were going to make the right decision and then it doesn't work, and you got to go back. But it's you got to be a little comfortable with the risk associated with making those decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you nailed it. And we call, there's always going to be risk, right? No risk, no reward, but you take calculated risks. You don't just dive into things. You do the homework. As we talked and we started working in the early days, let's just give you the landscape. For example, franchising, people concerns, millions of dollars. It's all fast food, and you're far from it, right? Far from that on the investment, far from that on the type of business. So it's more educational. I like to just say, if you're looking at business ownership, this could be a fit for you, but let's look at what a franchise is and why the hell do you want to do this? Because if that why is not strong enough, that's going to be tough, because you're going to have ups and downs. Entrepreneurship is cyclical. You got your highs and your lows. And we want to make sure that why is there. But before getting into all of that, I want to reiterate something you said. You had said something that's extremely important that I would say is probably forgotten most of the time. You spoke with your fiance. You made sure she was on the same page. guess what? If your family is not on board, if you're not letting them, kind of know what's going on. So whether it be your fiance or you're married and have children, even your children, letting them know, hey, mom or dad, we're going to be really busy this first year, but we're doing this to create, as you mentioned, the time freedom. It's going to cause some major issues down the road, because they're going to say, well, why are you working all the time? Or you're not spending enough time with us. And the whole point of it is to spend a lot more time, eventually, and getting obviously the business up and running. So that's key. There's an order of importance. And I always say, start with, kind of reflecting inward and figuring out why you want to do this, why you're not happy with the job, and then getting everyone on board and making sure they know what's going on. So you nailed it. You covered you kind of answered a few questions I was going to ask you. So I wanted just to reiterate that's super important. Without that, it's kind of like, start there. Don't start looking at franchises, start there, and then slowly kind of gradually do your research.
Yeah, before this conversation, we were talking books. When you think about a book that's really resonated with me is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of them is starting with the end in mind, and if you don't start with that end goal of what you're looking to accomplish, you can't really effectively work backwards. So for me, and again, sharing with the audience, I'm getting married in October. I had a lot of things that we need income, we need business. I got a lot of stuff I need to figure out. So for me, it was really important that if I was going to make a life transition like this, that the people who are partnerships to me in my life were on board with it. And so that they knew what it was going to look like. I tried to speak with as many owners of this type of business or people that were in this type of world so that I could understand those early days, so that I could help paint a picture of just where and how this was going to be different in good ways and changing ways, right?
Right.
I'll give you in the audience a story. In one of my earlier days, it was the first or second week, we got an emergency call. That call came in 9:30, 10 o'clock. I'm rolling off my couch. I'm sitting there comfy watching TV, and all of a sudden I'm gearing up to leave the house for a job. But those are the things that you do in the early days. Now, is that going to be something that we're going to do all the time? Maybe not. But right now, for where we're at, I wanted my fiance and the people who are involved in my life to understand and accept that I'm going to go through a little transition here, but it's ultimately for the long haul, that end destination, it's going to be worth it. And that's what we're working for every day. So yeah, you're right. You got it. The people who are involved in that life, you might be the one that's making this decision, but they need to be along for the ride as well, so that they know, because it's gonna throw everybody's world for a little bit of a loop here.
Right. Everyone's affected, right? You're not around every night, every weekend, especially that first year. That first year is set up. And if you've never owned the business, it's just learning, the ins and outs. For me, I never ran my own profit and loss and balance sheet. So I'm now going back to, my graduate school days or my undergrad days of learning basic accounting. So there's a learning curve, and much different from when I started almost 20 years ago. The support and a lot of the systems that these companies have in place have they're night and day. They've definitely have picked up and added additional services. Just for the audience to know, you're running. You had mentioned kind of your work days and things like that. You're running the business full time, correct? General manager in place.
Correct.
So what's the plan? What's the plan here? You launched the business. You're hiring the staff. What's the plan? Is that to transition to part time at some point? What does that look like?
Yeah. To me, I'm borrowing from some previous experience here. So I'll start backwards and we'll go forwards. I had experienced a lot of early career success because I started at the ground level. In my previous employer, I was a door greeter. I grew to be a salesperson. I grew from a salesperson to a sales manager, then a location manager. And so that scale up really helped me evolve and advance my career. And so I looked at that and I said to myself, how can I apply something similar to the franchise model? Right. In addition to that, going from one business that I knew really well and pulling the things from that business that are now going to translate over into another business, were going to leave me with some gaps where, I could have filled that with a general manager, but I thought it would be important before I went out and hired a general manager from the beginning, to take on a little bit of this myself. So my plan is, as of right now, I'm the general manager. Some days I'm the technician. Other days I'm the salesperson. Other days, as you mentioned with the profit and loss statement, I'm the accountant and CFO extraordinaire. Don't know if I would say extraordinaire, but I'm trying my best. And so I'm trying to wear as many hats in this business as I can, so that I can define, and so that we as a team can define what good looks like. And then as new people are coming in, as we are specializing some of the roles, and as I am offloading some of the things that are eating up my time, or where I'm just, not performing to the business in the way that the business should, that I can scale myself out. So very much so involved in the day-to-day right now. We are a small but mighty team of 3. It's myself, a lead technician, and a salesperson. And I felt being in the middle of all those things and being in the middle of the business gives me a strong understanding of not only the operational components, but what we need to do and be successful in the future. So where we're going is eventually a model where I am the owner. I will be working directly with either 1 to 2 or 3 leaders. That the 2 to 3 is probably somewhere out there beyond 18 to 24 months. But at least one other general manager who's responsible for not only the sales and the operational performance, but also managed through my guidance. So I'm hopeful to continue to grow this out to a place where I'm spending 8 to 12 hours a week, much more focused on the high-end decisions, the revenue generating decisions, the what service do we want to bring in decisions, and increasing and improving the benefits that we're offering to our employees. Because I think something that's often forgot about on the franchising side and the business ownership side is the benefits you can provide your hardworking team. Because we want to make sure that at least here in Hudson County, we're offering benefits that, just in the corporate world, people aren't seeing anymore these days. So lots of exciting stuff, but it all starts with me right now, being ready to do whatever it takes.
I love that. And being hands-on, sometimes, and it's not mandatory, right? You can be full-time, part-time to start, but I always say, when someone says which is better, and I said, I don't think one is better than the other, but the advantage of being full-time, if you can do that, some people need that income and obviously in the benefits to start. But for someone that, maybe lost their job or wants to learn the business right away, there's nothing like being full-time. That's what I did with, when I launched my business full-time. You get such a better appreciation because that you're living and breathing that business full-time. You get it, so that when you do have to hire out, exactly the kind of the expectation. But not only that, you can start to figure out, and you're going to experience this, the things you enjoy, and the things you don't enjoy so much doing, or the things you're good at and not good at. And you can't do it all, right? So yes, you can probably get good at everything if you give it enough time. But what are the things you like doing? And that may just be, I like sales, but I really like networking. And it could be where you hire a general manager, a leader of the team, and you're going to a different chamber of commerce event every day. So there's so many great options. And I talk about the autonomy of a business. People tell me there's not autonomy in a franchise. And I'm like, well, certain franchises, there's going to be less, but with, I would say, most home service types of brands, there's a lot of autonomy. The way you do marketing, if you want to do podcasts, if you want to network, there's some webinars, presentations, all that kind of stuff. So it's really important. And I think, you'll start learning what you like and not so much, and then who exactly you need to hire and when. And that just makes I think those decisions a lot easier.
Absolutely,
franchise,
right?
Yeah.
Just one thing on that, because sure. I think for me, this was a model that worked really well for me, right? Like I was a very hands-on employee. Even as a manager, I was very hands-on. And so for me to come on board as I build my business, I believe this strategy would work really well for me, right? And when I hear better, or like which one is better, right? Because I'm sure that that's a question you're getting a lot of from your audience or anybody that you're working with. It's like, hey, is it better to do it this way? Is it better that it depends on the individual. You know, it depends on the individual, the skill set, the network that you have, the people that you're bringing into this. Because, you know, if I had a friend or somebody I was close with who was looking, you know, maybe they had water mitigation experience, they were looking for that next step into a general manager, I could be looking at a different strategy.
Right.
But for me, even being in this career transition and feeling like, hey, I have all the time in the world to be able to commit to this, it's working well. On the other hand, I have a member in the franchise network who did a bit of the opposite. They went through a career transition. They re-upped with another company. They got this started at the same time, hired the management team, hired the salespeople. He's a little out of it. And guess what? It's working just fine for him. So it's all going to depend on the individual and what their, you know, risk tolerance is with offloading some of the formative business decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's there is no one size fits all. There's no answer for everyone. It's, you know, everyone's situation is different. Sometimes the interest is full-time, but you just can't afford it financially. And those are things that we talk about as well. We look at the time commitment. We look at the financials. You got to have that runway, right? You got to have that buffer. You know, I always say to someone, if you're going to leave your job, if you have the ability to leave your job, who's paying your rent? Who's paying your mortgage? And some people say, you know what? I got so excited. I didn't even think of that. You know, I have some savings aside, but yeah, someone has to pay that. So if you have someone else participating there, great. But if not, you know, those are things to consider in the process. And I see this all the time, including myself. You get super excited and you forget certain things. So I try to always ground and go back and say, okay, let's break up kind of the characteristics that we talked about in the first and second call, the time, the financials, you know, the role you're going to play in the business, the staff you'll have, which brings us to kind of, you know, determining the right brand. And, you know, we talked about when we first started working together, there's no exact number because it changes, but we'll say around 4,000 franchise companies and 70 plus industries. So what really stood out about, maybe we'll work in reverse. What stood out about Resto Pros that made you make that decision? We're going to pause here in our 2-part series. Thanks, Joey. We really appreciate it. We're going to continue this next week in part 2 with Joey Romanczuk and discuss how things are going with the brand new franchise there at Resto Pros.
The franchise has a model, they have a playbook, and they have all the resources to help you maximize your success. I would say 3 components that I was looking for in a franchise brand: an element of people service. I wanted to provide a service, not a product, having some flexibility and autonomy to be able to enjoy time with family and friends on holidays. It's going to take you, the business owner, to make it happen.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to learn how to make the transition from corporate to owning your franchise, join Giuseppe on the next episode. You can also follow on all social media platforms and achieve financial and time freedom today.